This then. Good morning, everyone, again. So I'm going to start this morning with some words from the Buddha. Surprise. When the Buddha, the story that is told, and I think this is probably pretty accurate, is that when the Buddha was dying, his disciples gathered around him. And of course, were distraught, not only at losing that man that had led them and guided them and taught them, but at losing what they regarded as their source of the Dharma. Okay. And so the Buddha spoke at that time. It's one of my favorite little chants that we used to do when we did Zen service. I'm going to read it to you in the original Pali first, and then I'll read you the translation. So the Pali is Atta Dipa, Viharata, Atta Sarana, Anana Sarana, Dhamma Dipa, Dhamma Sarana, Anana Sarana. And actually, when it's done in a service and a senior priest is officiated, it's chanted very slowly. Or maybe I'll chant it that way, actually. I like to do that. So, Ata Deepa Viharata Ata Sarana Anana Sarana Dhamma Deepa Dhamma Sarana Anana Sarana. Okay. And I think there's actually quite a bit of agreement that is very close to, if not precisely what the Buddha said. Where we kind of get a little more problematic is when we translate it, right? And so there are different translations. The one that I like is here. It says this: look within. You are the light itself. Rely on yourself. Do not rely on others. The Dharma is the light. Rely on the Dharma. Do not rely on anything other than the Dharma. This is interesting. Of course, and as I said, there are various translations. One I just looked at that instead of light, it talked about an island. You are an island, um, and the person who um, had written this felt that that was the definitive translation. But I think most Zen teachers that I know use the word light. Um, although I can understand where the word light can be problematic also. What does that mean? Look within. You are the light itself. Rely on yourself. Do not rely on others. The Dharma is the light. Rely on the Dharma. Do not rely on anything other than the Dharma. I think there could be a number of ways that we understand that, and that could be somewhat perplexing. But if we take it in that context of the Buddha's passing, then I think we understand that he's trying to give some reassurance to his students. I won't be here, but you can go on. The Dharma goes on. The light of the Dharma goes on. The light of the Dharma is within you. And you can manifest that light. Now, was he saying, therefore, okay, you don't need a teacher? Well, in a certain sense, he was. I've thought about this in a sense, as I see it, a Zen teacher is in some ways like a trail guide. That's one of the things that I am. I am a main guide, and I don't do it much anymore, but I have guided people on various hikes and canoe trips and so on. And what does the guide do? Well, I don't carry people up the mountain. I don't push them up the mountain. They have to walk up the mountain on their own power. What I do offer as a guide is some assistance or correction if they get off the path. Right? If you're going up the mountain, you get off the path, you can turn an ankle, you can get lost. And so staying on the path, especially you're going along, you're carrying this heavy pack. You're working hard, but you need that little bit of guidance, that little bit of adjustment. Oops, yep, yeah, be careful, don't step there, so on and so forth. That's what a guide does, and I think that's what a Zen teacher does. You're the one carrying the 30, 40-pound pack up the mountain. You're doing all the work. And nobody but you can do that work. I can't do it for you. I can only offer that little bit of guidance, that little, better take your step over there, be a little more careful. It's interesting because sometimes I read about accounts of Indian gurus who are able to enlighten people just with their touch, and I can't do that. I have no idea about that. I don't know any Zen teacher who can or would claim to. And that's not to say that I'm discrediting or disputing the Indian teachers that have that ability. It's just not something that I, as a Zen teacher, even understand. And maybe that's not only okay, but appropriate. Look, if I had the instant enlightenment wand, here it is. I know it's disappointing. It looks a lot like a pen. But if I had such a thing, maybe I would never use it. Because the journey is, and every step of it is important. all the transformation that we go through, the struggles that we go through, the challenges that we go through, the problems that we encounter along the way to realization, in a sense, are essential. They shape us, they hone us, they teach us. So people often fixate on the goal. It's like, oh, we all want to get to the top of the mountain. Well, sure, we all want to get to the top of the mountain. But if we fixate on that, we're missing all the steps along the way. We're missing the beautiful vistas. We're missing the little flower glowing by the side of the trail. We're missing all the essences of the journey. And so if we fixate on the top of the mountain, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. And the journey up the mountain it's never easy. If you're finding it easy, just wait a minute. Right? Our lives are complicated. Our world is complicated. There are challenges, there are gains, there are losses. Things are happening constantly. And that's where the refinement of our Dharma happens. It doesn't happen suddenly at the top of the mountain. It happens all along the way. All along the way. And some of those moments are wonderful and miraculous, and some of those moments are horrifying and terrible, and some of those moments are boring and stupid, and it's all part of that journey up the mountain. If we expect Zen to deliver us to bliss, we're going to be very disappointed. Not because moments of bliss don't occur, they sometimes do. Not because moments of wonder don't occur, they sometimes do. But they're just another step on the mountain, and just as surely as they come, they go away again. And if we aren't careful, we wind up clinging to these ephemeral moments, chasing them, searching for them. Ah, that was wonderful. That bliss. Woohoo. You know, and we burn the scrambled eggs. So you are the light. And where is the light? What does it say in Atadipa? It says the light is within. Again, it does not say read every book that was ever written about Zen. It does not say attend every online workshop and talk on Buddhism that you can find. It doesn't say don't do those things, but it doesn't. It says, look within, look within. What does that mean? Zazen. It means sit. It means look within. The light is within. We each have it. We each are born with it. It's not something we acquire. It's not something we learn. It's not something we're given. It's not something the teacher bestows upon us. It's something that we have at birth. Dogen says we sit zazen because we're already enlightened. What does that mean? We're feeling the call back to our original home, our original nature. We talk about that. Our original face. That's another expression that we use. Not something new, it's something original. Do not rely on others. That's sort of a radical statement. Rely on yourself. Do not rely on others. I think that's an important reminder if we understand it in the right context. Does it mean we shouldn't be a sangha? We shouldn't be together? We shouldn't support one another's practice? Absolutely, it does not mean that. But what I think it does mean is if somebody is pulling you in a direction that you feel is antithetical to your nature, to your understanding of Dharma, to your understanding of ethics, of the precepts, and so on, then run away from that person. At some level, we all have an instinctual sense of what's right, of what's good. And we have precepts to help reinforce that and guide that. We have Eightfold Noble Path to help reinforce that and guide us in that respect. And so if something doesn't feel right to us in that context, then we should run away. So we should remember the teacher is a guide, but not a guru. On the path of Zen. And we have the Dharma, and we have all the tools of the Dharma to help support us as we proceed along the path. I'm pausing there.
one of the things when I hear the word the Dharma, I guess it has multiple meanings, and one of them to me is oh, sorry, is the teachings, um, or the Dharma. But it seems in the quote from the Buddha, you may mean more the original face than the teachings. I'm wondering if you could clarify what what you experienced that he meant.
Uh, um, Probably not. No. Excuse me. Um, I think in this context, he's saying the Dharma is the way. Same kind of sense of the word of Tao in Taoism, the way, right? And the teachings help us to find that way, to stay on that path. Back to the mountain metaphor. We need to be on a certain path. And the again, the teachings, the precepts, the Eightfold Noble Path. Ah, there's that word, path, right there. Teachings like this, they help us stay on the way, and in a certain sense they therefore are the way, right? Those two things are sort of inseparable. But again, I think in this context, thinking more in terms of the Tao, the way, the path, and the teachings are the signs that help us stay on the trail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think uh, I think that concept of look within you, you are the light, is such a universal message. When you said that, uh, I thought immediately of Tolstoy and his book, "The Kingdom of God is Within You," and it seems like recently so many things that I read that are not necessarily Buddhist related, or things that might be more related to Western lines of thought. Um, the there's always this message that there is this light in you. It seems very universal. This goodness, and we also just have to look at the history of human beings, and we also have a lot of greed and anger within us that plays out and has played out forever and ever in wars. And so we have a lot of stuff in us. And I, I like your explanation of the Dharma being the guidepost to help us stay with the light and let go of um, the greed, the anger. And I guess there are a lot of other ways of looking at it where someone is more guiding you, like you must do this and then you will be good, you must not do that. So I think that what you're saying about this opens up a more autonomous way of of finding that light in the darkness and next to the anger and the greed, without a Bible or a set of commandments or a set of things that you must do, you must obey. And I think maybe that's what gets us off track with religion in general, is that sometimes it's to the benefit of the hierarchy that people behave in a certain way, and that may not necessarily be the light. So I just, I thank you for your comments, and I think it's just interesting how it plays out in so many traditions across human nature. And yet we sure stumble trying to find it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the stumbling is also human nature, right? That's we you know, we're going up the mountain with 30 pounds on our back and we're going to stumble. You know, and it's not about stumbling, it's about getting back up and continuing. When I was in my early 30s, I went through a period of spiritual searching in my life, and I was reading a lot from a lot of different traditions. I, didn't know where I wanted to go with any of it. Um, and I came across a book by a gentleman named Lex Hickson, and it was called Coming Home. And Hickson was a grad student in theology at Columbia at that time, I think, that he at the time he wrote the book. And what he did was he took essential teachings, I don't know, from a bunch of different traditions, um, from Christianity, from Judaism, but from Buddhism, but always from the sort of the mystical path within those traditions. So if we're again back to this kind of thing, almost all traditions have both an external and an internal path, if you will. you know and in so in Christianity, the external path is you go to church and you say certain prayers, and so on and so forth, and the internal path is people looking for a personal relationship with the light, with the Christ consciousness, and so on. Two very different things. Okay. Well, and that's true in almost every religion. Within Judaism, there's an external path, and the internal path is there's several. There's one of Kabbalah. There's the Hasidic mystical path, and so on. So, Hickson, but his central thesis was that all of these mystical paths, the Sufi path, and so on, go to the same place, right? They're different routes up the same mountain. One is not better than the other. They're just different ways of experiencing the same thing ultimately. And I thought that book was very important for me, and it opened it opened doors for me in a powerful way. Interestingly enough, Lex Hickson went on to live at Greystone Mountain and became a student of Greystone Monastery, and became a student of Bernie Glassman. And when Steph and Margaret were also at Greystone Monastery, and they became friends. So that little circle closed in a way that I thought was very beautiful. But anyway, so that I think the fact that multiple paths make reference to finding a light within, um, I believe ultimately they're all talking about the same thing. Different different, same mountain, different, little bit different pathways.
Yes, that's interesting. I've uh, frequently I'll think, oh, if I had the opportunity to go back to college again, what would I major in? And comparative religions seems like it's, high up there on interest, which confirms what you said. And I wonder if maybe the fact that in Buddhism and maybe Eastern religions in general, I don't know, uh, there's less of a hierarchy, less of an emphasis on hierarchy, and therefore maybe less uh, tendency to develop a system where we're not really taught to look within, we're taught to accept something else. So maybe I tend to be anti authoritarian sometimes, and maybe that's why Buddhism appeals to me. So thank you.
Well, that's the other thing this is teaching us. Be anti-authoritarianism. Look within for the light. Don't, if somebody tells you they've got the light and they're going to give it to you, run away. Right? And again, those external paths for the most part are about power, control, money. The same things, you know, we call the three poisons, right? And so it's very, very different, but within the same religion, often we could take Catholicism or Judaism or many of those same things, and they would have both those elements: an external path that very much has to do with hierarchy and power and money, and an internal path that's about the transformation of the human being in connection with a greater spiritual entity. You know, and we humans exploit religion.
I'm simply agreeing. I like what Susan said, and it seemed I've come to Zen with such great appreciation because the external path uh, went from my childhood to now from very, very rigid to understanding the rigidity of it that actually blocked um, the free look inside, and it was a path that I suppose too many dictates of the journey, the path, and not as much looking within, and that really forced me away from a certain form of Christianity into where I am now. And so, to me, it's a balm. And Susan said it really that these things begin to block you from actually looking internally rather than being a guide. So, my silence is only consent agreement. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cal.
Cal, I would agree. I had the same background with religion, and there was just no emphasis at all about. It's totally foreign looking within. Who are you? Who do you think you are? And I think I think what eventually brought me to find Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, was going through a period of my life where I was having real difficulty sleeping, and that made me think, what's going on with me that I can't do this very natural thing. And I just tried all sorts of things. And in the process, one was going to some Buddhist talk, and then one thing led to another and another. So it's interesting that sometimes an adversity is a good way to push one into finding what is meaningful and what's helpful. Still don't sleep, but I don't really care about it so much anymore. I figure, oh well, that's who I am.
Going within and looking within is can be very scary. And so I think for many people, much of the time, it's, if you stay on the surface of your life, you miss a lot of the richness, the fullness, the beauty, but you also don't have to face the demons, you know. So that's kind of the deal, if you will, you know. True spiritual growth, true psychological growth come at a price. The
Yeah.
price of being willing to confront our own foibles, our own follies, our own, that's where things are so wrong in so much of the religion today. This thing that we see in the headlines every day, people who think that they are saintly, saying, let's take those benefits away from children. It's like, you know, um, because there's nothing asking them to go within, look at their own stuff, look at how they are actually, they're manifesting the teachings of their religion by showing up once a week, you know, by giving some money, by whatever it is, and not by truly examining their own lives, their own hearts. And the inner spiritual paths all require that. You can't stay in the shallow end of the pool. You got to get out in the deep water. Sometimes you just swallow a mouthful of water, but that's all a part of learning to swim in the deep end. So, what about those Red Sox? Or what Tampa Bay Buccaneers or something?
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
I'll give a little postscript. So I was mentioning this book to Susan earlier. This is a book that I've been reading the last few days. Let's see, it says Addiction and Grace, Love and Spirituality and the Healing of Addictions. And I was curious about it for my work. It's actually an older book. And the author is a physician and he's also a Christian. But what he's using the word addictions is exactly the same as we would use the word attachments. It's very interesting because he talks about the great, substance addictions, but tiny addictions, things that we cling to, or wanting more money, or wanting a bigger house, all of these. So he's actually talking about exactly that. And I thought about, that's kind of, when I said that little thing about how about those Red Sox, that's kind of a joke, as it were, in the addiction counseling realm, because very, very often people coming into counseling do not want to talk about real stuff, and they don't want to go inwards. They don't want to deal with the profound realities of their life. They want to play on the surface. And sooner or later, the conversation is, well, how about those Red Sox? Because, you're having this absolutely meaningless, trivial conversation after a while. It's scary to go within. It's hard to go within. It's difficult to face the reality of who we are in an unvarnished way. Our imperfection, back to that notion of the spirituality of imperfection. We are imperfect. We will always be imperfect, and we cannot move spiritually unless we're ready to acknowledge that and live with it and work with it and base our lives around it. That's enough of a postscript for today.
Thank you.